NFL week 13. I had to do a double check, Ron. I can't believe it's week 13 already. You said you had a little bit of a rough Sunday in a little bit of recovery mode. Explain yourself.
Well, luckily it hasn't happened much this year, but 4 NFL games all went in the morning, 1 win, 3 losses. Didn't like the result, obviously. So the fact that Pittsburgh covered and won for me on Monday was nice. I didn't want to go 1-4, but took a little bit of extra time. As Cris, we chatted a little bit before the show. You know, it's a long season, even for us who love football. And, you know, doing all the work last week for the college with the rivalry games and who gets to win the division and who gets to win the conference, and looking at the hedging any of the season win totals, of which I had 43 of them. It really all came down to, I just needed a little extra day off this week. And I'm so thankful that the NCAA is accommodating with just 10 games. And we got to spend a little bit more time digging a little deeper at this point to try to find an edge. And just a little tiring. Plus, we had Thanksgiving, of course. Hopefully, everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Ours was very nice Thanksgiving. So a lot of stuff going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on what I touched on in previous episodes is when you're coming off a downer of a day, sometimes you just can't dive right into it. And I don't necessarily advise doing that if you feel obligated to. I think it's really important to come back fresher and with the right frame of mind, because if you're trudging through it, it's just not good. It's no bueno.
Yeah, I mean, you just go with the flow. You don't try to commit to something that you're not ready to commit to. Talked about cutting corners and never cutting corners on last week's show. So the way I deal with it is just taking a breath of fresh air and then getting back into it. Got right into the NCAA this week. Really got into some of the writing that I did for this week, and put the NFL on the back burner, and we'll revisit it a little bit more this afternoon and tonight because I've got time. I'm not going to rush into things and make any hasty decisions.
We got a lot of stuff to get to today. So if anybody has any comments or questions or something, we'll try to get to those. We probably will. I wanted to glance quickly at the standings, if you don't mind. I think that's important to do. The Bills obviously are kind of, they seem a little bit shaky all of a sudden. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, they had that rough stretch where they had a few interesting road games in a row. They had some situations with Josh Allen's potential injury that he was fighting through. They're still not healthy in the secondary. What's going to be interesting is not necessarily this week, even though it's an incredibly huge divisional game against New England. It's the fact that after this, they get 10 days off because that's the Thursday game. And I think we're going to see them reset. Now, just because a team has 10 days off doesn't mean they automatically reset. But in Buffalo's case, I think they have the coaching, the quarterback play, and the talent to be able to reset and not go through any of these situations that they've had the last 3-4 weeks where games have been coming down to the wire and not going in their favor. So I think it'll break favorably after this week. They just have to weather this one more game at New England.
Well, it certainly seemed like Jacksonville and Houston came out of the bye kind of slow. Jacksonville got their act together by the end of the game, but Houston was a complete and utter disaster that I don't know how anybody can put any money on them at this point. I had them last week just because I had to. I wanted to touch base on our Baltimore Ravens because they were like minus 700 coming into last week to win the division, and I haven't checked the updated futures. But now they're down to minus 240. At some point, we're going to have to, with our plus 220s and our plus 250s, if things keep staying this tight, we might have to consider hedging out a little bit or protecting those bets. What are you thinking about that?
I don't have to think about it. I did that. I talked about it about a month ago. I had already worried about, I was never worried about Cincinnati's talent. I've always been worried about their schedule. And coming out of the game with a win against Tennessee last week tells me that Tennessee, we know what we got in Tennessee, but Cincinnati was up to the challenge. They beat them twice in a row. They stopped Derrick Henry cold, essentially. And my feeling is that Cincinnati is one of the top 6 teams in the NFL right now.
We're going to get to some rankings in a little bit. They're starting to worry me a little bit. I believe that they certainly have a fighting chance. What's their divisional records here? I can't even see. They're 1-3. So Baltimore's got a huge tiebreaker just with the schedule and the divisional record. So
9 points or more they've led in at least the second half, if not the fourth quarter, in every single game this year. Baltimore's issue isn't that Cincinnati's on their heels. Baltimore's issue is they should be 10-1 right now.
Yeah.
And with all the talent they have, something's missing in end game situations. And it's both coaching and quarterback play, in my opinion.
The Raiders might be revisiting what they did last year. They've won a couple games in a row, and they won their final 4 games last year. I believe they played back-to-back overtime games. Is that right?
That's right. They're now, I'm not sure of this, but I think they've won their last 6 overtime games.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's
relatively random, but to me, they're a flawed team that just happened to win these 2 toss-up games, and we'll see what happens from here. Remember, they were playing Arizona, so it's not exactly a coach's advantage there that they were able to obtain.
Now, a week ago, we both agreed, and we didn't know what the line was during the show, but we made the Washington Commanders minus 125 or so to make the playoffs. And when we got off air, I noticed it was plus 150, plus 160. So we took some of that, and that's looking pretty good at this point.
Yeah.
Seattle is backed out of the playoffs. And I'm not sure the Giants are going to be able to hold on. Washington has a nice pathway into these playoffs. And we mentioned it at the beginning of the year. Nobody was talking about Washington, and they're ignoring them. Look out for them. And I actually said, well, I guess I was wrong, around week 6 or week 5. I said, well, they didn't show up this season. I was wrong there, but here they are.
Chemistry changed. Obviously, they like playing for this quarterback more than the other quarterback. Their defensive metrics are pretty sound. The coaching is pretty consistent. Are they a great team? No. Would they be a playoff team in the AFC? No. They might be in last place in the AFC East, for example, but they're not in the AFC East. They're in the contentious NFC East. But right now, you'd have to say there's a better than 50-50 chance that they'll make the playoffs. And that's all you're looking for is an advantage in the odds. And win or lose, plus 145 is what I got, is an advantage.
Yeah, it's looking like a good bet. This NFC South, I have New Orleans Saints futures, and I'm looking at 5 and 6 Tampa Bay. And New Orleans is nowhere to be found, sitting in the cellar, but they do play Tampa Bay this week. So they can tighten up this race even more, and that should be interesting. And we see the Rams now are giving the Lions the 3rd best draft pick if the season were to end today. That's just amazing how far they've fallen. Everybody on that team's injured. I think Seattle's defense has been exposed. I don't look optimistically on Seattle going forward as a team that is like going to continue to achieve what they were in the first half of the season. I think they're going to be adequate. How do you assess Seattle going forward?
First of all, I'll have more to say about the Saints later when we come up with some other topics. But with Seattle, it's a long season for the rookies, and they're relying on a lot of rookies from an absolute quality draft class that they had. And so instead of playing 11, 12 games, they're going to be playing 17 games plus the preseason when they had to prove themselves as rookies. So they played in those games too. They weren't held out of action. So they're probably going to hit the rookie wall if they haven't already. They've overachieved in a number of areas. If you said they would have lost these last 2 games close, at the beginning of the year, you would have said, of course they would. That's the kind of team they are. So they're not doing anything wrong. They're just not that great a team, and they've been overachieving in the first half of the year.
Now, even with 12 men on the field, if anybody saw that video, bizarre. The player runs in from the sidelines and gets involved in the play. I cannot believe we have not heard of a fine or it hasn't made bigger news. You mentioned you wanted a banner called NFL Reunion Week. What the hell is NFL Reunion Week?
NFL Reunion Week, we've got two games that are interesting. Let's start with the Philadelphia game against Tennessee. A.J. Brown, I think it was, couldn't wait to get out of Tennessee. Philadelphia gobbled him up. Now he gets to play his old team. And those things are always very interesting when the team is at home, when they get to play in the stadium and the visiting team comes in there. So he knows a lot about what Tennessee brings defensively. He's obviously going to be itching for a good game, saying, look, you got rid of me, and so on. The game plan is probably going to be funneled a little bit more through Brown so that he gets some touches. It's just an interesting dynamic when somebody leaves right away. And I have the other one I should mention is much more of a reunion when you have San Francisco and Miami, because you have Miami's coach who coached for 5 years in San Francisco. You have San Francisco's backfield now reuniting, or they've relocated to the East Coast in Miami. We've already heard comments from the San Francisco coach saying, I'm going to do my best to treat this as any other week, because it's about the players and so on. He's well aware of it. He's really shown some signs as being a very good coach. But it's a very interesting dynamic because you have a lot of the play calling and a lot of the schemes are borrowed from San Francisco. And so you're going to see teams that know the cadence. You're going to see teams that script the first 15 plays. You're going to see a lot of similarities in this matchup.
A lot of people are excited about this Miami offense, but if we take a look at what they've been doing and how they've been doing it, who they've been playing. I mean, their last 4 games have been, against who? 4 nobodies. I'm looking for the schedule here.
Yeah, as you're looking at that, note that San Francisco has pitched a shutout. 3 games in a row or so? 4 games in a row?
In the second half, they haven't allowed any points.
Yeah.
So we've seen Miami really look impressive against high-quality teams like the Houston Texans, the Chicago Bears, Cleveland Browns, the Detroit Lions. So just something to consider when getting involved in that game. That's going to be a very interesting game, to say the least, though.
Absolutely.
You wanted to touch base on the bottom 3 teams.
Yeah.
Fire away.
Well, I want to know who your bottom 3 teams are, and then I'll see if you match with mine.
Oh, let's see. Oh boy. Houston's at the bottom.
Agree.
I'm not going to disclose who 31 is.
Okay.
I have 30 at Arizona, though.
Okay.
And I have the Rams.
Okay. I have 2 of those 3. I have the Rams there, but I also have the Bears.
I've got the Bears. I've got the Giants, Denver, and Chicago.
Okay. So we're kind of in the ballpark there, but the Rams really fell, huh? I have the Rams at 30th, and you have the Rams around 30th as well. Look how far they've fallen.
Yeah, but we were on this. Week 3, week 4. We're arguing with people on Twitter that, it was very evident from when the season immediately started that this team didn't have they were just bad everywhere on all aspects of the game. And, that's what, my metrics are very good at. It gets a little bit of a lead on what the overall performance of a team is. And it really gets us ahead of a failing Green Bay or an improving Tennessee. It's not going to pick up everything because it's had Jacksonville overrated. most of the season. But Jacksonville, quite frankly, just shoots themselves in the foot and has been in a position to win a lot of those games that they lost. So, are the metrics really bad, or is it just situational for being a young team with a new coach? So, all things to consider.
See, this is a good handicapping tip because now you look at the line, for example, this week, the Rams are something like 7 or 7.5 point underdogs at home to a Seattle team that we just discussed is kind of hitting the wall right now. That just shows you how far the Rams have fallen, but maybe it's an overreaction. So everybody getting on the Rams or no good bandwagon now probably missed the real bandwagon part of it. So it's too late. It's just too late there. And I was going to ask you about what's your most surprising team. And let me jump the gun before you give yours, because I was not on the Jacksonville bandwagon early on like you were. And yet now they are my most surprising team. They've entered the top 16 of my rankings for the first time this week. And we're seeing signs of a young team, like you said, coming together. And we started to see it in the fourth quarter last week when they came from behind against Baltimore. And Lawrence looked very decisive with his throws. He looked confident. He looked like he was building on something. Again, Urban Meyer is nowhere near the building. The door's been locked. The keys have been thrown away. And I think he's going to start to realize his potential.
It's funny you say that, though. I was watching a handful of plays of the Jacksonville game, and I saw a series or two where Trevor looked awful, and I was making comments, to somebody else. I'm like, this guy sucks. I mean, he rolls out to the right, and he didn't even look good. I mean, he just looked completely like a fish out of water on a handful of plays, and then he pulls off the miraculous comeback. And admittedly, very, very impressive. So, it's nice to see, but I still see some things that rub me the wrong way about him, frankly.
Now, there were some Twitter comments when I usually make some pre-game chatter about each game, what to look for. Is Jacksonville ready? Is this and that, whatever. And there were some comments saying that, no, Lawrence is never going to be a great quarterback. I still think it's early to tell. A lot of these quarterbacks that start from day one have to overcome their own mistakes with the NFL having tighter windows in to throw to, and any bad habits they take from college to the NFL has to be reconstructed. And now he's had 2 different coaches or 3 different coaches in a span of 20 something games. Too early to tell, but I think this could be a starting point for him. Is there one team that you have that either was lower than you thought or higher than you thought when you did your numbers this week?
The Jacksonville's always higher than metrically than where they belong in, as far as a real ranking. Seattle did not fall as far as I thought that they would. I find that pretty odd. And Pittsburgh is still, really not faring well. Those are kind of the extremes. That kind of segues us into, I want to go into my trailing 5 weeks. Because I noticed what was really odd is 5 out of the 6 teams, the bottom 6 teams over the last 5 weeks, were clearly expected to be in the playoffs. So just to reword that so it's clear, since that was a word salad, 5 out of the 6 teams that I have over the last 5 weeks are performing that were supposed to be playoff teams, and they're performing very low. Who do you think's number 32 over the last 5 weeks, Ron?
I should do homework before actually looking at this. To me, Atlanta is underachieving. And I'm not going to put them in order of 32 or whatever, but you look at performance over the last 5 or 6 weeks, and I'm running down my sheet of teams. Denver's been underachieving all year, so I don't know how you rate that. But Atlanta, to me, has been going downhill. The Giants have been going downhill. Let's see what else. Well, we know Green Bay's been going downhill. Let's see what else the Rams we already know, we talked about.
Number 32, Minnesota again for the second week in a row.
I'd say the Saints should be way down there.
The Rams, number 31.
Okay.
Denver.
Okay. That makes sense.
Chicago.
Okay.
New Orleans. The Giants.
So to me, I got 5 out of 6, but I would not have gotten Minnesota.
But we expected Minnesota and the Rams and Denver and the do I have the yeah, why did I say it was 5 out of 6? Huh. That's strange. I know I made a mental note of that. I do have the right chart. Okay. I guess I made a mistake. So here's the full list. I need to. We'll fit them in.
A little surprising that the Raiders are that high.
Washington, Miami, Detroit, San Francisco, and the Raiders right at the top. Anything? Any surprises of the teams at the bottom or near?
Well,
the top?
Minnesota would be a surprise at 32 to me. I
made another error. Buffalo was number 32 last week.
Yeah, and now they jumped up about 6 spots. So yeah. So it moves that way. For the whole season, where we know Philadelphia has the best record in football. What's your ranking of Philadelphia? Are they your number 1 team?
No, I have them number 3.
Okay. You'd be surprised where I have them now. I do have a gap after them, but I have them number 6.
Well, the top 5 are all bunched up with Buffalo and Kansas City and San Francisco and Dallas.
I agree.
And they're probably, when you really think about it, if you had to pull one team that doesn't belong, Philadelphia is certainly the one that I would have the least confidence in.
I have Cincinnati at 5 and Philly at 6.
I don't. Cincinnati's a little bit down, but Cincinnati and KC is going to be a really interesting game. I'm going to be curious where that line sits. Cincinnati's going. Why does it feel like Kansas City doesn't even need to win the game practically? I mean, if they can take a week off, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I mean, playing a quality team and having Joe Burrow on the other sidelines, and the fact that it's not a standalone game. So, Pat Mahomes, he's going to try no matter what. He's got that competitive attitude, but it is going to be a great game. The afternoon slate is actually better than usual. Sometimes we get some real sleepers in the afternoon, but I like the slate in the afternoon.
So, that segues, what games are you considering must watch or interesting you the most this week? And which games would you watch only if you were on a prison TV?
Anything involving Houston, I would ask that I would be moved to solitary confinement and maybe no TVs available. And although this week it's Cleveland and Deshaun Watson, so there's going to be a lot of eyes on it. So Houston gets some viewers this week. KC Cincinnati is the number 1 game on the board that I want to watch. But there's a lot of intriguing matchups. The Giants have been trending down. Washington's been trending up, and they meet halfway now because they get to play each other at the New York Giants. Has the line overreacted in that game? We all know that. I know is a dangerous word. We all think that Washington has surpassed the New York Giants in terms of their playoff viability, but should they be a road favorite of close to 3 points? I mean, maybe the line is overreacted a little. Just putting
it's kind of disappointing to see that because the smell test tells you divisional game. Washington is on this big long streak, and quite frankly, Heineke's been getting away with murder. He's been throwing. Yeah. He's been very fortunate with the ball. The balls he's been throwing haven't been picked off more often. He just has not been making the same decisions he was making a few weeks ago. And I'd be concerned if you're a Washington backer whether he's going to be able to keep it up because it just seems like he's been skating by.
Yeah.
Any thoughts there?
as strong a chemistry as they have, no one's going to confuse him as being a top 10 or top 15 quarterback. And now he's going against the Giants, who have held teams to around 60% pass completion. So he better be extra careful now, because the Giants play fundamentally sound pass defense, and they're doing it without household names. So it's very interesting the way that goes. And they know their season hinges on this game. If the Giants lose this game, they're most likely out of the playoffs, because, that's a divisional game. That's a divisional home game. The Washington will have won something like 6 out of their last 7 or whatever the number is. It doesn't look good. So this is an enormously important game.
You'll be on the Giants if that hits 3, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would have to be. And I would, again, I'm doing the work now. I took the day off from doing the NFL. But that would be the only side that I would be looking at is the Giants, because I think you get better than market value on this game. And Washington's strength in terms of avoiding turnovers, just like you said, goes into the teeth of a pretty good New York Giant defense that I'll study a little bit more prior to the game.
If you gave me free money to bet the Houston-Cleveland game, I just wouldn't do it. But I still feel a little bit of curiosity of seeing how Watson does and the Houston effort. I'd rather watch that game than the Packers-Bears. The Packers-Bears game does absolutely nothing for me this week.
Yeah, I would agree with you completely on that one. For defensive-minded people like myself, the New Orleans-Tampa game is interesting. So let me touch upon New Orleans right now. That was pathetic, what they did against San Francisco. I don't care how good a defense San Francisco has, but you're 1 year removed from one of the most offensive innovators in the game, in Sean Payton. And now you've got Dennis Allen, who's been with the organization for years and years and knows defense, and they score 0 points, and they're practically non-competitive in a year when they could literally be winning the division with any kind of offensive continuity, with Tampa basically owning to their 5-6 record. That's what Tampa is. Tampa's not better than 5-6. We knew that going into the season. We've already cashed the ticket under 11.5 wins. So we knew about Tampa. New Orleans was the variable that they had enough talent to win that division, and they are flat out underachieving.
Well, you and I went heads up a little bit because you added to Tampa Bay to win the division the same week. I said, "Whoa, hold the phone, Chuck. I'm not sure you want to do that, and you're going to probably win that out of default if you knew."
Right. Yeah, it's default.
So you made a crappy bet that you're going to get away with, as far as I'm concerned, because they certainly have not performed as you expected that they would perform. And,
yes and no, because that was my other loser last week. I had Tampa in a good situation against Cleveland, and they had the lead and didn't deliver, and actually could have covered in overtime. Brady had 2 chances and didn't deliver. That's on them. But when I made the bet, it was minus 205, I think, is what I got. And then the next week it was like minus 500. Last week it was minus 500. Now pull up those divisional odds on Tampa right now. I'm curious, because it should be back down to the 200s.
Minus 330.
So I still have value on the ticket, believe it or not, because it's by default, and that's
default. So
that's all I care about.
Why? Boy, look at that. Kansas City minus 10,000 to win the division. Tennessee's only minus 800.
10,000. Wow.
And Tennessee is 7-4 versus 4-7. That's nuts. I think the game of the day, the early day, is Jacksonville, Detroit. I'm looking forward to seeing that game. And I've heard people in other media outlets express that they are interested in that game also. I think that could be a pretty fun game.
Okay. If I had to pick a morning game, because some of these morning games aren't that intriguing to me.
The Jets,
I would pick Washington. I would watch Washington and the New York Giants just because I'm intrigued to see that matchup.
Ugh.
I mean, it's
Jesus.
not. It's going to be ugly. You got Daniel Jones on one side, and Taylor Heineke on the other side. Neither one of them are penciled in, inked in to be the starter next year. But it's an important game.
The Miami San Francisco is obviously the game of the day. No, maybe it is. Kansas City Cincinnati's awfully interesting too. It's a tough.
As I think that afternoon slate is incredible, and I like watching the Chargers play the Raiders as well because they're always entertaining games. So literally, you got 3 out of the 4 afternoon games that are really compelling.
Did they really not change this Indianapolis Dallas game off the Sunday night? They didn't flex this out?
It's Dallas. They drive the market. Thanksgiving Dallas had the largest viewing ever for regular season.
So Birdie says Tua took that hard hit. I don't know whether you saw it, but it was. The guy was bent over like a pretzel. And but I think they were going to take him out anyway. So we don't really know what's up with that.
I think it's a reaction to what happened earlier in the year when they should have had him sit for a week instead of rushing him back. And now they're playing the cautious side. I think he's good to go. There hasn't been anything that I've seen to the contrary, but it's only Tuesday.
Denver's out there is the most surprising. They certainly are. I mean, nobody would have ever thought with that defense that they have that they would flame out as badly as they have done. Will that head coach? Will he ever get a job in the NFL as a head coach again?
Well, that was one of my questions. What coaches would you fire? And this coach I would fire in a second. He hasn't got the job done, but part of the blame has to go to Russell Wilson when they traded. And here's the interesting fact of the trade with Russell Wilson. It wasn't just that they gave up all these number 1 and number 2 draft choices. They gave up a starting defensive tackle in, I can't remember his name completely. I want to say Shelby Rogers, but they gave up a starting defensive tackle and they gave up Noah Fant, who was their lead tight end, and they've had erratic tight end play without him. They gave up 2 established players plus 4 other draft choices to get Russell Wilson. And I don't think anybody could have predicted that he would have fallen this far, and that 16 is the maximum number they seem to be able to get.
If I don't fully, I've just heard out of the corner of my, I just don't give a crap about Russell Wilson or Denver anymore. But I have heard, his teammates are screaming at him. It's getting very, very ugly there. I mean, he legitimately looks bad. This isn't, some sort of a slump. He legitimately is a step slower. The arm is weaker. The teammates are yelling at him on the sidelines. How bad of a situation is it? Is he backing himself out of a Hall of Fame consideration here?
We'll have to wait and see on that. I mean, it's close. He would be one of those on the fence for Hall of Fame consideration. You have to give credit to Seattle's great success, partially to him, a lot to that doomsday defense, that 12th man defense there, and maybe a little bit to Pete Carroll, who knows what he's doing as well.
Going back quickly on the San Francisco game, what are your thoughts on that San Francisco-Miami game?
I see the comment there, thank you, that it's unbettable. And at the moment, I would tend to agree. To be honest, I'll have to look at that game closer. I have one situation that heavily favors San Francisco in that game, and it's a completely bettable situation. The line is over 3. I know that 3.5 is a touching 4. I think I would be looking at a possible -3 with San Francisco, but I don't think I would weigh more than 3 in this scenario, and I'm comfortable passing it up.
I want to finish up I want to get back to that comment, but let's finish up the coaches that need a new job because you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah. You have any on yours besides Denver? New Orleans is the big one on mine. I don't see how the franchise can continue with Dennis Allen as head coach next year.
I was listening to another show and it was pointed out, was it the New Orleans game or was it the Cleveland game? I think it was the New Orleans game. No, he was New Orleans, Tampa Bay. When did they play?
Week 2, but they played this Monday night coming up too, so that's an important game.
Oh, you know what? It was the Tampa Bay Cleveland game. Somebody made a comment. I think it was Rob Pizzola that said that the personnel that they had on the field was for a defensive coach, he should have known better and didn't make take a timeout and change the who was covering who, and it was literally so bad that the best player was on the worst defensive player and he didn't do anything about it.
Sometimes it's just coaches are better suited to do the one thing they do well, whether it be defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, and so on. They're not suited to run the whole show. And Dennis Allen fits in that picture.
You mentioned Baltimore earlier. I always had a lot of respect for Harbaugh because of their success. But over the last, and we touched on it a little bit, where he's starting to lose my confidence, but it's getting bad. Why don't you expand on what you want to say on that?
Well, I've noticed it for years. Before Lamar Jackson was there, his end game management and end half management, I saw it continuously at the end of the first half, was bottom 5. I mean, just atrocious. And then when Jackson got hurt at the end of last year, he missed the last 5 games, and they played all those crazy games where they went to overtime. They missed a 2-point conversion to win. They missed another 2-point conversion to win. So that's 2 in a 4-week stretch. They had winnable games, but they didn't have Lamar Jackson on the field. But they ran the same plays and they were as aggressive without Lamar Jackson, even though they had a quarterback who was most likely not going to succeed like Lamar Jackson did. You're talking about an organization that has continuously been top 5 in drafting. From Ozzie Newsome to his successor, the way they use the rules where they have all these compensatory picks, they had 6 of them last year. In the 4th round, they had 6 picks alone, and they added a lot of talent to that team. They've got all the talent in the world, and they have a lot of depth on that roster. And I think Harbaugh is messing it up. We know his playoff record. We know Jackson's playoff record. I think he's a wonderful coach to play for. The players like him. He seems like a nice guy. He seems like he knows his stuff. But end of half, end of game situations, he's been blessed with a team with a lot of talent, and he hasn't taken them where he needs to take them.
It's just inexcusable how they just keep blowing. Their 4 losses were all double. They were leading by double digits, except this last one. I don't think they ever did go up by double digits.
No, but 19-10 in the 4th quarter is still a problem.
The McVay, why does he stick around? I think they're in a rebuild mode. I'm not sure Stafford even bothers to come back, quite frankly.
You know, it wouldn't surprise me. He flirted with television and radio supposedly last year. The long-term outlook for this team, because of all their lack of draft capital, is pretty bad. They've got Aaron Darnold. They've got Cooper Kupp. They've got a bunch of other people that are lower level, either overachievers or shouldn't be starters because of their lack of draft capital. The needle is not pointing up. There's unless he rolls up his sleeves and says, I'm committed for the long term and I'm going to make this team better. There's a problem with where the Rams' trajectory is, with Seattle getting all these picks coming up because of their trade with Denver. You talked about Detroit getting the Rams pick. What about Seattle getting Denver's pick?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy. They've got, I think, a first and even a second next year from Denver. So they've got 3 of the top 30-something picks. That means Seattle is going to be on an upward trajectory. San Francisco is, and the Rams are not.
I think the Chargers would have been looking for a new coach if they hadn't pulled out the game Sunday. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. So it's almost like coaches that we would fire. We might fire Staley. I don't know if they will fire Staley because he's kind of tied to the GM, and the GM doesn't want to look bad either in this situation. So we'll see. Don't sleep on Carolina.
I'm going to sleep on them.
All I can tell you is if somehow they get to 6 wins, I'm going to be a happy camper because that puts me right smack in the middle of where they need to be.
I wanted to go back to we were talking about the San Francisco Miami game, and it brings me to another topic of what it takes to be a great bettor. And I'm surprising you on the topic, but it's like beating a dead horse for 2 reasons. It's funny because a friend of mine said, we were nursing a few lines last week, and coming up with the game and who you want to bet is the easy part. That's the easiest part of the equation. And that's something that's probably hard for people to understand because it's knowing how to bet who you want to bet that is critically important. And I've touched on it last week and the week before about, front loading, isolated front end teasers or parlays. That's changing the way that I'm using games. For example, if you like Buffalo this week, why am I going to lay 5? I'm not going to lay 5 if I bet Buffalo. I'm going to use it in a parlay. If the line had been 7 or 6 or whatever, I would have used it in a front end teaser and just treated it as its own bet and just into something else I'm going to bet anyway. But I'm not interested in doing that. So you can bet games straight, parlays, teasers. And I'm not talking about dumb, stagnant parlays and teasers. I'm talking about ones that you're using multi-purpose for multiple different reasons. And I look at this like San Francisco. There's a betting influencer in the market that released San Francisco earlier today, -3.5, with 75% of the money coming in on Miami. And I'm in contact with people that were betting Miami, that were rushing to get in their +3.5 before the line was going to go down to 3. And lo and behold, the influencer comes out and takes San Francisco -3.5. And there were already at least a handful of -3, -120s. There's no doubt it was going to 3. And the fact that somebody would take -3.5 without seeing if they can get a 3, what do you have to lose? So your worst case scenario, if it's leaning that far down to the 3, where you've got -120s and 3.5s and no 4s, why are you betting -3.5? Your worst case scenario is you're going to get a -4 if you're just asleep at the wheel. But with Miami's offense and Tua fever and all this, that line was certainly going to hit 3. And that's a critical error in judgment of knowing when to bet. And, that's just one example. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you find yourself every week having to nurse lines and keep the lines, eyes on them and figuring out how you want to bet them?
Yeah, I mean, it's variation on a theme. I've been experimenting with something that I'll talk about in a second, but you certainly have to have your price. What you said is exactly true. You know what team you think has the matchup or metric advantage or situational advantage, whatever method that you came to the team. Then you look at the numbers and you say, well, what makes sense to me? If the number is 6.5, why would you bet it at 6.5 if you like the underdog? Why not wait to see if it goes to 7? If the number's 3.5 and you like the favorite, why not wait and see if it goes to 4? I mean, goes to 3, goes the other way. I mean, you have to have a number in mind. There's a lot of games I have a number in mind where I say it's going to be my low tier. I usually have 3 tiers of betting. It's my lowest tier. I'm not going to bet it unless it reaches my number. And if it doesn't reach my number, I won't bet it. But I've experimented with something. I want to get your thoughts on this. If I don't get the number and the game kicks off, I'll look to see if I can get the number in game.
Yeah.
And in the college game, it's funny how it moves so fast. I said, I blew it. I should have been on this one, and the number was 3.5, and I was comfortable with that, but I was waiting for 3, but I didn't get it, and I didn't play it. And the next thing I know, I'll check in game, and all of a sudden the number was 1.5. And I'm saying, well, okay, then I'm going to go in, or vice versa. Sometimes you get more points. I'm finding that early in-game betting, because nothing really is decided in the first 5 minutes of a game, especially if let's say the total on a college game is 65, 62 or whatever, and the other team is going into the red zone or something like that. If they're going to score, the expectation is that there's still going to be 55 or 58 more points in the game. Why not take the other value just because they received the opening kickoff and went down the field? I'm comfortable with looking at the first 3-4 minutes if I missed a number, and if I still like that play, taking it in game.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is it's a matter of compartmentalizing what your intentions were, and you already know there's going to be a ton of scoring. You know that your team may be falling behind, or variety of things may not look great. You may get a lot of extra value on what you're trying to do. So, just because a team scores first right away, I mean, you look at that Philadelphia Green Bay, they were up, 7-0 right away. If you like Green Bay, there's a perfect time to pop in, and they ended up, going out to the lead. Indianapolis went out to the lead. So, teams that look dead can come back, and you can get some amazing value if you have your heart set on those teams with the in-game betting. But
if you've done your homework with metrics and you say, okay, we all know, or at least let me put it, I know that Green Bay has a weakness versus the run, and especially against running quarterbacks. So it doesn't matter to me if Green Bay gets the lead. If Philadelphia is showing any inclination of running the ball, eventually they're going to wear out Green Bay's run defense. You have to do your homework in advance. You don't blindly go into this in-game betting and say, oh, it looks like this and this and this. I have to have, at least for me, I have to have a scenario in mind where if it meets A, B, and C, or just A and B, then I'm going to make the play. But I've already thought this through before starting it out.
And it's really important. When I needed that Philadelphia under, and you knew after that first drive, you looked at the uniforms. I'm joking, but there was an energy of the Philadelphia Eagles, and you knew Rodgers wasn't going to lay down. And when they just ran it down that field right away, I knew that total was just shot right away.
Yeah,
you can, pace of play and urgency. Even if nothing's happening, something is going to kind of break out down the road oftentimes. You wanted to touch on some NCAA Bowl advice. We may come back to the NFL, but I wanted to get your bowl topic in.
Cris, I don't think it's too early to talk about the NCAA Bowl games, because next week the lines will come out. The 930 bowl games that we seem to have, or 42 or 43, all the pairings are going to be set by Sunday. And the lines are going to start coming out Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening for these bowl games. And so I think it's important not to rush into things in certain areas. And this is really important to me, the kind of advice that I think we could give right now. First of all, from Saturday to now, under 72 hours, we've seen, I think, over 100 people say, thank you, University of XYZ, I'm entering the transfer portal. Utah, for example, has a game this week against USC to decide who goes to the Rose Bowl at the very least. Their starting running back has declared for the portal, and he's not playing in the championship game,
really?
Much less the bowl game.
Yeah.
There's a few other instances like that where, not for the championship games, but for the bowl games, you're seeing leading tacklers, top wide receivers, they've already entered their name in the transfer portal, which means they're not playing in a bowl game. If you think, oh my goodness, I've got to get this line right now, check the rosters first. Because
why do they have to enter? Why are they bothering to enter the portal so early?
I don't know. Well, first of all, I think it's the NCAA's fault for even having the portal open right now. Why can't they have the portal open from January 1st to July 1st and be done with it? I mean, you have people entering the portal before the season starts and before the season ends. We had trickles of that the last few weeks, but now the floodgates are open. So every year, more and more people are opting out of bowl games.
I just don't I don't understand this at all. Michigan's quarterback entered the portal.
That's right.
What is he, Looney Tunes? I mean, and you're talking about the Utah running back entering the. Why would these people, when they have a chance to go to the national championship game, not wait until after the game?
You're one play away from being from the backup quarterback to the starting quarterback.
Right.
If the starting quarterback gets hurt, all of a sudden you're playing in a playoff game without an experienced quarterback. That makes no sense at all to me. But that's one of the things that teams are dealing with, and that's a heavy burden on them. But handicappers are dealing with it too. Bettors are dealing with it. How do you set the line for these games that are going to move 5-6 points when all of a sudden half of Florida's team 2 years ago and half of Oklahoma's team last year said, we don't want to play in a bowl game? And that was it. The line plummeted. Lines changed 7 to 10 points, if you remember, on a couple of these games.
Oh, Western Michigan last year changed 14 points.
Yeah. So that's one area of advice I would give. The other thing is obvious, and that's motivation. If a team had high expectations for the season and now they're going into the Idaho Potato Bowl, you better believe that they're not going to be as motivated as a team that's so thrilled to finally get to a bowl game. And here they are, and they're gonna do everything in their power to win. They get these extra bowl practices and so on. Motivation matters. If some of these conference championship losers get relegated to a pretty routine bowl, that's a steep drop for some of these teams. So be careful about that as well. And I'd say also take a look at the interim coach situation, the new coach situation. Liberty's coach leaves to go to Auburn. That's one situation. Cincinnati's coach leaves before the bowl game, and we'll have more because it's, domino effect is what happens. So even before you handicap the games, you have to handicap the side stuff that goes on. 3 areas: motivation, coaches, portal. That's an early advice when the lines come out next Sunday.
5, 6, 7 years ago, I used to really look forward to entering the major wager bowl pool. And that was a lot of fun. I think it was $500 to get in or $100 to get in. And you had to pick you had to rank, you had to pick 15 bowl games and rank them 3, 2, or 1 points each. You got 5 of each. And that was just a lot of fun. And that's pretty much doesn't interest me in the least anymore because the whole dynamics of the bowls have completely changed. You mentioned the transfer portals. Last year, I think I was either 13-1 or 13-2 in the bowls.
You were better than that.
And I didn't. It might have been actually better, but
you're better because we had a running contest who could get to 18-1 or 19-2 and stuff. It was amazing.
Maybe you're right. I mean, it was asinine. Come to think of it, it was better than that. But the point of the matter is, I wasn't handicapping anything way in advance. I don't want to have positions on any games that are not championship related, because just take it from me. There are people that know stuff long before it hits the betting market. I was very fortunate last year to get a lot of good information ahead of the market. And I'm not talking about 5 minutes before the market. I'm talking about days. And in those situations, the books pretty much know what's going on there. And believe it or not, they're not going to hard move on information because they want to position themselves to take action and, on both sides and make sure that they're getting some bets at the bad numbers before it moves. It's really tricky what their motivations are depending on where the line is on a particular game and what the perception is. But there is a hell of a lot of information that we don't know publicly that's floating around in the underground. So when you see these lines shift a little and become a little bit beneficial, instead of jumping on them, your alarm bell should go off and say, okay, what don't I know? Maybe I'll chase down the beat writers, see if there's anything coming out of there. Are there any potential major injury concerns that may be known by some people and not others? You're dealing with college kids. You're dealing with money. College kids talk. You've got a lot of staff going in and out of programs. The information leaks out like you wouldn't believe. So just be very cautious. I wouldn't be in a position to be betting all the bowl games. I'd much rather get my money in when I know what the hell's going on with the teams and not have to worry about is this player going to be in, this coach going to be there, are there injuries here, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I mean, I still take my time with most of the bowls. I run simulations on the bowls too, because I have more time to do that and to really see how it plays out. But the other piece of advice is you better know the depth charts of these teams. If somebody major goes out of the game, who's the guy who replaces him? Does he have 2 catches for 12 yards on the year? Has he not seen any action? Is instead of a 6'5" target, is it a 5'11" target? You really have to study who's next up. And then certainly you have to study whether or not 3 offensive linemen are gone or 3 defensive backs. Those cluster changes really make a difference.
Well, we're at the hour point. Any other topics come to mind that we haven't touched on? Any other things?
No, I think that's pretty good for a show right now. It's really a compelling week in the NFL, certainly at least for watching. We'll see about handicapping. Maybe we'll touch more about it on Friday. Perfect timing with the scroll there, especially I'm thrilled that we got the Kansas City-Cincinnati game that we get to talk about with Ted. I mean, he won't have interviews from the afternoon game, but he's trying to get Aaron Rodgers, believe it or not, for the Packer game. No promises, because Aaron Rodgers is probably going to be out of sight, out of mind with his rehab and stuff. But it'll be very, very interesting to see if we could get somebody on the Packers that will talk about Jordan Love, for example.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about on that game, because I think some could question why they're putting Rodgers in, because he is slated to go. And Pat Mahomes became a new father, so will that affect his game?
Okay, didn't know that.
So we appreciate everybody joining us, and like or subscribe. That'll let you know when we're coming on again. We're going to be back on Friday with Ted from Sports USA Live, hopefully with a player interview or two, and we're going to be discussing more issues with the games as they percolated in our thought process throughout the week. New content, and we appreciate everybody joining. And until Friday, good luck.
So long.